guess moving on now to a slightly different area of cricket. Cricket's probably not had the best reputation over the last few years and name for itself after what's come out from former players, and the levels of racism that are being reported and spoken about in cricket. Would you be able to explain a bit more about it and a bit about your experience as well?
Yeah, so when it comes to the discussion on racism in cricket, my main issues with it was that it was the institutional racism that I think a lot of people are still trying to, are still trying to get their head around. Some people just, think that racism has to be, you know, outward abuse and racial comments. Um, my experience was not so much that. I just, as I talked to you about going into the under 19 team. Up until that age, it was all right. It felt, all the squads that I played in were had plenty of people of color in the team. There was a mix of a good mix of people in the team, quite reasonable camaraderie at that young age. Playing football as a 14, 15, 16, 17 year old, I was called the P word many a time on a football pitch, by opposition players, sometimes by parents on the sidelines. And I remember when I was that age, my mum didn't want me to play football. She had a fear of me going into football for that reason, because she didn't think it was the right environment for me. Um, but I loved my football, so I went into that space. And looking back now, it was not okay. It was not acceptable. But I used to kind of almost use it at that point, like I'm. I would feel it fuel me to. I'll show you what I can do with my play, but it's not okay. That's not all right. That's not it wasn't acceptable, and that's. And I'm slightly going off subject here just to give you, because I want to try and compare it to my experience in
Yeah.
cricket. Um, but it's a conversation that's talked about a lot. Why do we not have more representation in football from people of colour? If I go to all the five-a-side pitches or seven-a-side pitches, you've probably seen going around the country, go to different complexes. There's so many people playing from minorities, but it doesn't transition. You hear institutional bias comments like, Asian families don't want their kids to play football, or they want their kids to go to uni. Well, I'm sure your mum and dad wanted you to go to uni as well, but I'm sure they also encouraged you and was happy to see you evolve in sport. And I left that environment, and I personally don't think if I tried to go through the football route, I think I would have left that environment eventually anyway, because it wasn't a good environment. With cricket, it was more subtle. You would just notice, especially when I went into the national team, that there was a real difference of treatment for a person of colour and for a white counterpart. I mean, my friend and teammate and ex-Scottish, still current leading wicket taker of Scotland, Majid Hack, who spoke out with me, has known and on record as saying you have to work 3, 4, 5 times harder than your white counterpart to get anywhere near the same opportunities. Now, Majid was a standout performer for Scotland, and even Majid went through 2, 3 years through his career where he was completely vanished from the team, constantly in and out. This guy, at the age of 31, career ended because he sent a tweet from a World Cup saying it's always tougher when you're in the minority, #race. He never played for his country again, and he is still, till this day, the leading wicket taker of all time. God knows how many wickets he could have taken if the 2, 3 years were not taken out the middle of his career and then losing at the end. With me, I was, I was, I was making my way into the team. I worked really hard to get into the national team, but when I got into the national team, I was not ever given like a clear opportunity. Here's what you're going to do for the next 10 games. We're giving you this chance. I was in, I was out. I'd be waiting to go into bat at number 5, 6. I'd be tapped on the shoulder. I'd be told I'm batting later in the order. And it just always felt, and this was not just my experience, This was an experience of a lot of my other counterparts who are people of colour. And then if you just have to look at the stats and just have to look at this, if you look side by side at people, white counterparts, it was very different. They never had that same kind of pressure and put on them. So it was more the difference of treatment with my experience. It was more, I never felt I was supported, or I never felt when I did something well, I didn't feel I was given that encouragement, or if I didn't do well, I didn't feel I was, it was just kind of like, yeah, out the way, going. And I carried a lot of drinks for my national team. It's a running joke now. People, we can talk about more about the experience of talking out afterwards, but it's not, being a whistleblower is not all it's cracked up to be. Not that I ever thought it was going to be anything of a nice experience, but it's just what we knew, myself and Majid, having come through the system from a very young age up until national team level, is we knew this system is not right. This is biased. The boy that comes, and by the way, I'm very careful the way I put this across. My mother is, I'm born into a mixed background. My mother is white. My father is South Asian. I love my white, I've got nothing but, there's no you and I to me. I believe we're all one. We're all, as human, we're all one. But when you see like kids that come from a private school or whatnot and have that bit more of a privileged background, I don't believe in sport that should mean that they should get more opportunities than others. I've even seen it as far as white people suffering from it as well, because they come from an area that's a bit deprived, or they've not come through that system. And I know I know of people that have spoken to the review after we spoke out, who were white people who experienced their own bias in it, that when they went into the system, they didn't feel like they were inclusive. They felt like they were outsiders going into that space, and it's not okay. That's not the way the system should be. So if they're feeling like that, people of color are even more minority to that. It can be even tougher. So that's more what, to any of your listeners out there, it's not all about necessarily, racism is not all about, you don't have to be abusing somebody constantly, but it's about if this treatment is different to how you would treat somebody else. That is institutional racism. And then if you don't change the systems, the main thing we were also fighting for was representation. Now, you know all about this kind of stuff, George. You were on the Young Ambassadors at Sport Scotland, which, by the way, I think is a brilliant initiative, and I think it's great that they're bringing young voices, because you need to listen to young people. For too long, decisions were made by predominantly older white people who maybe don't understand the challenges that the youth are facing today, or young women in sport and girls are facing in sport today, or people of colour are facing in sport today. So you have to have representation at the top level from different types of people, be it women, people of colour, so that you can understand, okay, that person can explain a bit more to the board at boardroom level what's happening. So I thought it was great. One of the questions I asked Sport Scotland was, you've got these young ambassadors in place, do you actually listen to them? And to speak to, then get to meet some of the youngsters that I met, yourself, Emmanuel, Steph, that we've done a podcast previously. You were like, yeah, they listen to us. And I thought that was brilliant, because that was not what it was like in my youth coming through. It was kind of like the older people sitting on the board and they just tell you what to do, but they don't have any understanding of what your challenges might be and differences of other people that come from different cultures. These are the things that need to change across all sports. Football definitely is a place where there needs to be more representation, so people start to feel more comfortable to come into that space, because there's more of an understanding of their background and what kind of challenges they may face to come into sport that might be different from a challenge somebody else may face. So it's not one fits all, and that's where Cricket Scotland were found to be institutionally racist, and I think everyone just took it as like, we're not racist, I've never said anything racist to anybody, and it was very much into denial. Let's attack these two whistleblowers. Look, how dare they do this? Myself and Majid were not the only two people that spoke to that review. Hundreds of people spoke to that review. You can't have two people find an institution just because of their own experience. We were just the ones that opened the door for other people to speak behind closed doors, as it should have been in a safe environment. And we just wanted to see systems and things change. And you know what? Credit to Cricket Scotland on that front. We have a lot more representation now from women, from people of colour. Still a lot of work to be done, but there has been changes. What you have to be careful of is that it's not tokenistic, though. Tokenistic gestures are not the way forward. It still needs to be done properly, where you are bringing the right people into the correct roles, because it can have a negative impact if you bring people in and you've not prepared them for a role and they're not ready for that role, and it can have the wrong impact. So all of these things are all learning. I'm learning in it as well. I didn't know how to fix all of this. I just knew there had to be a change and some more understanding and some more representation. And I hope that leads across all sports in future.
Yeah, thank you for talking through that so well. I think it is important to recognise as well that Cricket Scotland was found institutionally racist. I think it was April or so last year that it came out, and that you like what happened in your experiences. You and Majid weren't the only two as well, but there were many more going on. Did you have a support network or people you felt comfortable speaking about this issue, or was it something that you just kept to yourself during this time in your career?
Yeah, no, there was nobody. Certainly not at senior management level. National team wise, yeah, nobody. If you did kind of try and raise your voice, or you did kind of try and say it, then you were just kind of, the old fashioned, like, just shut up and get on with it. Towards the latter part of my career, I didn't see eye to eye with my coach at that time. We just, I didn't think he offered that kind of level of support. I think it was a pretty lonely place. Not good at all. And it's changed, I know, significantly now, and they are doing a lot more work in that space to make sure that that's not the case. I mean, now the squad has like a sports psychologist and stuff that travels with them. None of that was in place. You didn't really have anybody to talk to, and some of your team. You had a couple of friends. You always had a few people that you were okay with in your team that you could maybe let them know. And while you were sitting at night time in the hotel or whatever, that I'm not feeling too great. I'm not really enjoying this, and you could have a bit of chat about it or go for a meal. But yeah, there was not any real professional support in that space. And having then kind of, when your career comes to an end, I mean, my career came to an end at international level at the age of 26, when I was probably just coming into my peak. I felt that anyway as a batsman. You're coming into your best years at 27, 28, and a bit of a dip in form just cost me my career. I mean, people go out of form all the time. You see it. There's England players, big test playing players that have their moments, and it's about having a support to help them through that. Whereas I was just cast away and put to the back of the line, which led to me, similar to Majid, who sent a tweet. I spoke out in the media, and I spoke about a coach in particular who I felt had completely mistreated me and ended my career basically, and that was tough. And I'll never get that back. But I mean, having come from the age of, I've told you all my story, the amount of cricket I've played, the amount of winters abroad, and everything I committed, everything my parents committed, for my career to end at 26, when I still had a lot to offer, was not a nice feeling. And what followed was definitely depression, having to then transition to try and kind of find other paths in life, other routes to go in life. Didn't go to university. I was a 17-year-old who signed a contract down south, and off I went. So to all you listeners out there, don't make the mistake that I made. My mum and dad did their best to encourage me to do that, to study, but I was just one track, tunnel vision. I want to play cricket, and I couldn't see myself doing anything else. But my advice would definitely be, and I do my best to pass that on to my kids as well, is that studies come first because you don't know what's going to happen in sport. My mum always used to say to me, it takes one bad injury and your career could be over. Then what? And I think that's the best way you can sum it up. That always have that fallback. I know you're studying, George, and I think that's amazing. And I know you play your rugby and you're involved in that, and I think that's great. Good. So having the balance is what I think is important. But yeah, stick at school and get yourself to university and get yourself something that because you just don't know what's around the corner in life.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's great advice, and having other paths and other venues. Obviously, studies are a great option for so many people, but whether it can be anything, just having a couple options opening. But I guess it's all hindsight. And when you're a 17-year-old and you're given a contract to come down to London and play at Lords for the game you've loved your whole life, it's a bit like, yep, we'll be doing that. But yeah, I guess
I
as
wasn't going to
well.
turn it away. Yeah, I'm not going to turn
No,
it away.
exactly. I think you'd be a bit silly too. Um, as well, this was all going on during your career, but you didn't come out and it wasn't spoken or made aware until after. So what was that process of coming out and speaking about it and getting to the point we're at now? How did you deal with that? Was there sort of a toll or a setback on you emotionally, on your family, or was it just a really supportive, positive experience that you gladly did?
Not the latter, anyway, George. No, it was. It's. I did it for the right reasons. I knew there had to be change, and I would do it again. Um, but sadly, if some youngster was to ask me, I hope I can say with confidence one day that won't be the case. But if somebody was to come to me and say, "Should I go and speak out about the treatment that I've had?" I would. I couldn't tell them with confidence that yes, you should, because I don't think everybody can handle what comes with it. Um, I have had some very rocky moments with it all. Last year, probably the last 18 months of my life, since that, is quite difficult for me to talk about. Um, I have been, along with Majid, and obviously we've not mentioned this, but this whole kind of case and story came about from Azim Rafiq speaking south of the border initially, and then we were asked the question here in Scotland of what we thought Scottish cricket was like and if they were inclusive or if there was any racism issues, and we were honest about that. And what followed, when it Sport Scotland, to be fair to them, they reacted quite quickly. They put a review in place. It was carried out. It spoke to hundreds of people over the course of 6 months, and then it was produced. On I attended a press conference in the summer of last year, and yeah, I don't think you can really prepare yourself for what follows. I think many of my if I truly believe, and I've thought about this quite a lot. If I played cricket with somebody, wherever they were from, and if they came out and spoke about an experience when they weren't coming out and speaking about an individual, I didn't come out and speak about any individuals. I came about and spoke about the institution. I would, I've thought about it over and over again. If I played with somebody, toured with somebody, and they were part of my life, and I knew of them, and that they were going through this, I'd like to think I would have reached out. I like to think I would offer support to that person. But when you're a person of colour, sadly, that's not the case. Myself and Majid, have been. Now, I'm not going to say we haven't had good people who have supported us. Of course, we have. There has been some really good people who've supported us, but it's more. It's less so than those that have fueled a campaign to tear us apart as much as they can personally, pull things out from 15, 20 years ago, people feeding stories behind the scenes of not even factually correct stuff, putting it all over social media. You know, I've, I have a, I'm not going to name the person because I don't want to give them the airtime. But there's one person in particular who has literally sent sometimes 20, 30 tweets a day about Majid and I. And what hurt the most is that there's like ex-players of ours that have followed and engaged with this person that is posting constant Islamophobia, racism, harassment, and you know, I'm talking ex-Scotland captains that have followed these people. I'm not talking low profile people. And not what they've obviously done. There's a lot of cowards out there who will not come to the forefront themselves, but I think a lot of people have used these trolls and other people to get their information out there. And there was moments where I just thought, why did I do this? I went into a new job. It affected my job. I couldn't function in my job. I had problems at home. You know, me and my wife had problems, and it was it was. I had days where I was okay, and then I just had days where I just did, and I couldn't believe what was happening, and I just felt, why is that? You know, it's just turned into like a personal campaign against both of us, and then the people that are under investigation, or you know, somebody comes out and talks about, you know, they've been struggling with their mental health a little bit, and the institution and the people that are part of it have actually proven themselves and exposed themselves over and over again for why they were found to be institutionally racist. They've proved our point that it's always tougher when you're in the minority. You don't get the same treatment, and you find that a lot of people will remain silent, even though they probably know this is wrong. You only get few good people that are prepared to come and stand next to you as a white counterpart and say this is not okay, and don't that shouldn't be happening. But the other ones won't want to do it, because if they do it, they'll be seen as, oh, so you've gone into that camp, have you now? You know, you're part of that. Those people that have had the audacity to suggest that there were any issues within in this. You know, it is. You've probably sensed a change in my tone when I'm talking about this compared to the rest of the podcast, where I'm talking about cricket and I'm talking about the stuff that I love. Not a good feeling of you know, and I did have some support. There has been some good people. I don't want to name them on the podcast because they'll probably get targeted as well. Then that's another thing. You know, people will want to support you, but then probably to be fearing to support you publicly because they don't want to get brought into. You know, anyone who has supported us, people have targeted them. You know, my podcast was something I loved to do, but I got into a headspace where I just couldn't podcast anymore. I couldn't bring myself to, didn't have that energy about me. If I did do a podcast and my guest retweeted it and gave me a nice comment, they would get bombarded by these trolls. These trolls are still there, by the way. I could go on right now and it'll be constant posts and seeing a lot of them I've blocked, and I choose to remove it from my mind, but it still trickles through in other channels. There'll be one night where I've had my home address getting posted, pictures of my house. Um, you know, my kids being talked about. You know, I'd been through a divorce. All of this stuff they've brought to the forefront. They've put it all out there because I spoke out, and because and even when vindicated, I remember in the press conference I said, you know, I hope we can all come together and we can become better and we can move forward, but that wasn't the case. And yes, there's been times where I'm only human. I can only take so much if you're going to keep coming at me. There has been some stuff that I've put on social media and said myself that in hindsight, you know, I wish I hadn't have done. But when you're getting constantly targeted with personal, deep personal things that only you really know what the truth is about that. You know what happened, and you know what you went through in those situations. For people to be talking about this so nasty and to the point that, you know, I personally think, wouldn't surprise me if other whistleblowers, some people, this kind of stuff could push people to over the edge to the likes of suicide and stuff. Now, I didn't quite get there, but I wasn't far. You know, it was bad. It was. I started to get snappy with the people around me because I couldn't cope with. I wasn't processing things correctly. Um, so yeah, my message would be that, you know, I've learned as well in all of this that coming to sit down at the table and talking about these things and trying to move forward is one thing, but going, but like personally tearing chunks out of people publicly about really personal matters can have consequences. I mean, there is people that have got, so the biggest thing that the Scottish cricket community are annoyed about is that there's some individual cases of individuals who are under referral and they're being investigated. And that should be, we've never come out and spoke of the details of what and I'll put it on record that it's not, some people might be surprised who's actually involved in some of these cases because they just think that it's just Majid and I. All Majid and I. We are the ones that have done this. There's other people. There's other cases. There's other people who have had experiences. So they've taken it as a real personal thing, and it's just turned into a. And then yes, we are now fighting back. I mean, my social media. I don't really want to be posting back and forward like almost petty arguments and having to continually prove the point. Just recently a guy tried to call us out, challenge us, or challenge Majid in particular for talking about selections and other things like that. This same guy, when I was in South Africa, wrote an article about the fact that I shouldn't have been in the team, and I was just a youngster coming into the national team. So it's one rule for one, but another rule for others. And this is my message from all of this, is that this is not institutional racism and all these kind of issues, misogyny, all these other points, all these things that go on. We need to accept that it exists. That is the biggest first hurdle. It's not a personal. Don't take it all personally, and just accept that it exists. I know misogyny exists. Of course I do. I've seen the way some women have been treated in sport and how it's not as inclusive for women. It's changing and it's getting better. But we all know that it's been a major issue and it's changed. So until we appreciate those issues, you can't move forward. You're just stuck in this ruck that is just painful and a constant battle. And some days you just think, why? Why have I done this? But I'll go to my grave one day, and I'll be content, I think, with knowing that. And I get slagged off for this statement. People pick a fool of me for saying this a lot of the time when I said it, but I'll still say it now, and those people won't stop me from saying it. Is that I hope one day that some little boy or girl does not go through the same experiences that I did, or a lot of other people did. And I hope they get equal opportunity. And I hope one day we can talk about all sports in Scotland, because I think Scotland is a wonderful country. I think it's got so much to offer. I hope we're talking about all the great things that are happening in sport. And maybe one day history will look back fondly on the stance that Majid, Azim Rafiq took south of the border, because this is not just a cricket issue. We've talked about football as well on this. There's a chance here to change everything for the better for everybody. I don't want to see anybody treated any differently. Everybody should be treated equal. And yeah, got me a bit emotional there at the back end of that podcast now, George. I'm just getting myself back together now. But yeah, onwards and upwards.
Thank you for speaking about that. I know it can be challenging at times. Looking forward a bit now into your career post cricket and what you've been moving on to as well. Obviously, you mentioned at the start of the podcast about your recent ventures into commentary as well. Could you just tell me a bit about what you've been getting involved in since your cricket career, and I guess how those skills that you built up from 20 plus years of playing cricket have transitioned into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I tell people my degree is just is life in cricket. That's my degree. I would like to think that through travelling and through meeting all people from different walks of life, I can adjust. I can speak to people. I'm comfortable in most environments. That's why I would encourage any of your listeners and any young people out there to try and take yourself out of your comfort zone. It's not always easy, but it will benefit you in the long run. So my degree is like a life degree, and I guess it's just stood me in good stead to starting to start with the podcast. The podcast got me quite a lot of exposure, got me a lot of positive feedback, got me kind of spotted as maybe somebody that could come into that kind of media reporting space, and just just as time has went on, I've networked more and more and more, and got to know more and more people, And yeah, I got given the opportunity on Saturday there to cover my first ever live football match on Open Mics BBC Scotland. Safe to say, my editor, maybe he's seen something in me and he was confident in my ability. I'm really just looking to explore this media world, learn as much as I can. You know, that's going to be the key. It's just totally going to be a complete learning curve for me, but I'm really excited by it. You know, I love talking sport. I love being in that space, and I'm gonna work really really hard to become a successful sports reporter, and hopefully it will lead into other things. You know, I don't just love football. You know, I also host a few other podcasts now as well, where I like to talk boxing. I like to talk, obviously, cricket. So these kind of three sports are three sports that I think are kind of my niche that I know quite well: cricket, football, and boxing. But I see myself as an all-rounder. I think I'm keen to get out and experience other sports as well. I'm certainly encouraging my editor to, you know, I think we're very focused on football, which understandably brings the biggest audiences in Scotland. But I feel sorry sometimes for some other sports. Sometimes I think there's scope there to give it a little bit more attention, because there's people playing a lot of other sports out there as well. So I'm going to be trying to to encourage my editor to let me cover some other things and interview some other people from some other walks of life and do some other things and continue on with my podcast as well. I'm hoping to relaunch very 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 soon. I've had quite a lengthy break with some of the stuff that we've spoken about on this podcast, but feeling refreshed 2024, hopefully onwards and upwards. And yeah, and it's great to just again to you, George. It's fantastic to see what you're doing. I think you're a natural, and I think you're gonna do really well in this space.
Nice one, thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear, and like I can't wait to see where what you're covering next, and all the sports you get around to, because I know you'll have great success in this. I guess just to sort of wrap up, I know we've spoken a lot today from sort of the start of your cricket career and how it got into your bloodstream, and sort of your amazing experiences when you were younger and going down to London, and then as well about the traveling abroad and getting to play cricket abroad and the experiences and things you learnt from that. And then I guess as well about racism and how that's affected your experiences and your life as well. And then obviously what you're hoping to do now. Just to conclude, I guess you've gone through a huge amount and learnt a huge amount through what you've done. What would your piece of advice be to sort of a young person that's maybe facing a few barriers, or maybe doesn't feel like they quite belong where in the area they're in, but they want to stick it out? What would your piece of advice be to that person?
Try to find somebody a bit senior. Speak about anything that you're feeling. Try to, you know, again, I'm not confident across all sports because I'm not in all of those spaces. But I think with what happened with the review in cricket, it was probably an eye opener, not just for cricket. It's probably an eye opener for a lot of other sports. You know, I know that the report was sent to all sports governing bodies to give them an opportunity to have a look at what they're doing in their sports. And I actually attended a race and racism conference last year. Did you? Were you not there? Did I not?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
seen you there,
I
didn't
was.
I?
Yeah, yeah,
You know, you had the CEOs from all the other sports, and there was a lot of good stuff getting talked about. So there is good people in a lot of these sports, and I would encourage a youngster, if they're feeling something and they're struggling with something, don't suffer in silence, because it'll only get worse, and then you'll probably end up leaving something that you're really passionate about, and you don't want to feel you don't want to feel regrets down the line that could have spoken to somebody, and it may have helped my situation, and I could have played in that sport longer, or maybe somebody's got the talent that they could progress to, you know, professional level in that sport, and they'll live with that for you know. And I would encourage people, you don't necessarily you know, you don't want to live with regrets. You want to try and give yourself the best opportunity to succeed. So my advice would be, enjoy what you're doing. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. And if you feel things are getting too much pressure on yourself, speak to somebody. And if you don't have success speaking to one person, you may have to try. I know it's not always easy, but try to speak to somebody else. You will be able to find somebody who will understand and will give you a helping hand. And that's pretty much it. But that aside, sport is amazing. It's one of the best things, and it really is one of the best things in the world. Don't be playing too many computer games, youngsters. Is my message. Play it to play it to a nice balance, but get yourself out there, get yourself outside. You know, experience the outdoors. Go and join a local club. Get a few friends together and go and play a bit of sport. It's amazing what it can do for you. It's amazing the camaraderie that comes from it. You'll feel like you're part of a family. And you told me a lot of good things, George, when we spoke in my podcast about the rugby club you're part of and all the great things that you were doing at the club. It's amazing if you get into these environments. So, to any young kids out there, enjoy your sport, but don't suffer in silence if you're feeling something.
Qasim, thank you so much for your time today, for talking through your career path, your journey, your ups and downs, and everything you've been through. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and just to thank you for joining us.